Hey everybody, as you guys are joining, just say hi in the chat. Today I have Guy here. Guy, I've been following you for at least, I want to say it's 6 years. Um, and you're one of those people who's in it for the long run, which I love. I try to connect with those personalities early on in my career because I'm doing this for the long run. If you don't mind, Guy, do you mind introducing yourself and how you got here and what you do now?
Sure. So, Sam, thanks so much. The feeling is mutual. I've had a ton of respect for the stuff you've been sharing online as well. And in fact, I was looking back, you were actually a guest on our clienting podcast with Kelly Street a few years back, and so grateful for you sharing there too. How did I get here? Well, I was a trial lawyer for a very brief period of time back in the mid 2000s, and as the story goes, I was asking folks around about like, hey, what should we be doing for marketing? And a lot of the lawyers I talked to said, people don't use the internet to hire lawyers like me. And I said, that can't be right. And so then my partner and I founded Attorneys Sync to prove that people were using the internet, and been doing that at Attorneys Sync. And then I'm an advisor and investor in a couple of legal tech companies, Lawmatics being one of those. And we have another agency that's outside of legal that does media management. And that's it. We love to help educate lawyers about how to grow.
So is it a lot of media buying?
It's mostly, I would say it's mostly search, mostly SEO, but yes, media buying, and the media buying has grown, and we can talk about that too. As so like the whys there. It's competitive out there, and we just joke around. Every 6 months, new crop of lawyers here in the U.S., and it's a very, very competitive landscape, and search is more competitive, and search is it's exciting because search is always changing, and especially as we can talk about this too going into the new year. I know some folks were wondering about SGE, but these platforms, they're publicly traded companies, they got to make money. So how do they do that? They do it on ads right now, and so visibility for ads goes up, cost for ads goes up, becomes more competitive to rank organically, but it can still be done.
Nice. So let's just get the SEO out of the way. The question that's been kind of the elephant in the room is what does the future of SEO look like, especially with ChatGPT and Bard and all these AI chat conversations, MLMs that are coming out. How does SEO play into that? Is it still worthwhile to invest into SEO with that coming in?
Yeah, we get that question a lot, and the short answer is, well, like a lot of these answers, it depends on a lot of things, but I'll tell you where my head is on SEO. SEO, as long as people are using search engines, SEO is going to be a thing. Now, how people use search engines and what businesses and law firms can do to appear in search results in order to actually convert organic traffic into fees, that's changing a lot. But I would say this, you talk about long term, like, I people tend to say this, SEO it's an investment, right? I mean, if you want to use like the real estate analogy, SEO is building your house, right? It's a lot of the SEO folks too talk about like treating SEO like a product, but your website is your product, and in terms of search. And so things like Google Business Profiles, reviews, video, all of the stuff you can do organically that search engines, suck up and put in results. I still think there's a tremendous amount of value there. I think the short term thinking is I'm going to connect my OpenAI API to my WordPress API and just churn out a lot of pages. And frankly, like it will work until it stops working. And when that will happen is hard to say. But the SEOs were fast to adopt, just churning out. Some of these guys did these test cases, 10,000 pages a day, and rank, traffic until Google figured it out, and then total site totally de-indexed. And so there's a risk there if you're going to play that game. But look, I think there's not Google's not going anywhere. Their organic results aren't going anywhere. I think it's just more of like strategically how you approach the problem may change.
So I found that a lot of times what we have on our phone really dictates how we're spending our time and that also dictates how our potential clients are spending on time. So I kind of found myself in a situation about 5 or 6 months ago. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm kind of using ChatGPT even more than Google search. So I went ahead and made a big commitment, which was on my bottom right, which is a very good real estate, which is close to like clicking it. I used to have a Google there, and now that's replaced with ChatGPT. But what that means is now I'm going into ChatGPT to search for regular questions that I have on a day-to-day basis, than versus going to Google. So how does that play out into, for lawyers? We're building all this content on Google, but now if all of a sudden there's this OpenAI company comes and takes over people's searches, how does that play into the picture? And, what does that mean for us?
Sure. Well, that's the war that's going on right now. Will ChatGPT persuade enough consumers, or most consumers, or some significant number of consumers, to turn to ChatGPT for results? And of course, Google is fighting back, and they're coming up with their own conversational search. And we mentioned this before, so let's just play it out. If for so one way to think about it is this: if there are enough ChatGPT users to justify your time there, it might make sense for you to start thinking about it. But remember how ChatGPT is pulling results. They're crawling the web too, and so a lot of that's the same stuff, that the same behind the scenes stuff that's being used as the corpus for serving results, even though they're doing it in a totally different way. It's still going to be the information from the web. And so where does information from the web come from? It comes from publishing on different sites and publishing on your website and third-party sites. And so one of the things that we've been telling folks to check is ask ChatGPT, ask Bard, ask Gemini, ask all of these LLMs where the sources they're pulling the information from. And what we're seeing is a lot of it's like the resurgence of like the directories. And so again, if you want to say you want to be the lawyer that's, I mean, I was just doing this the other day, car accident lawyers near me, but do it in ChatGPT, or best car accident lawyers, best whatever lawyers, same thing you'd think of in search. Type that into ChatGPT and see what ChatGPT gives you as the source data. And a lot of it's the traditional directories and other data sources. But I think being there is valid. But it's still a Google world, and Google's good. Google's got a lot of resources. They've been doing AI a lot longer than OpenAI has. We can talk too philosophically about like why does it seem like Google results or their SGE and their AI isn't as good. I don't think it's because they can't do it. I think it's a lot more because they've been a little bit slower to release, and they have a big problem to solve, right? So ChatGPT, OpenAI, they're a subscription model if you want the advanced version. So they're getting $20 a month from people that are using it. Google's an ad platform, and so them trying to figure out how are they going to incorporate ads without disrupting the golden goose and still show these SGE results. I think that's a challenge for them. So I don't know. I've been long on like, look, know about what's going on with Chat GPT, follow it, see where those sources are. People are going to use it. They are using it. It's long run. It's right now. Google's got a big moat around it. So I wouldn't abandon Google quite yet.
So I just, as you suggested, I just went into ChatGPT and I searched for best car accident lawyer near me. And he said, if you're looking for a top rated car accident lawyer in San Antonio, Texas, which it's not where I'm based in. And he gave me 5 names and their phone numbers. And I'm like, why do you think I was based in San Antonio? And it's like, based on the search results that appeared, most of them were appearing in San Antonio. So basically, what this shows is ChatGPT is not really ready for what we're talking about. For people, for potential clients to come in and ask for local services or lawyers to hire from. But as you said, Guy, Google does though, and Google being the behemoth as it is. Guy, do you know what percentage of their business comes from their ad business?
Like 90 some percent. You take out the moonshot stuff. I mean, they're the one trick pony. I think they wish that they weren't, but that's why if you follow any of this antitrust hearing stuff, which by the way has been fascinating to watch. because they've been very church and state in the past about like ads and organic results and those teams not talking to each other, and comes to find out that there's something else going on there. I'll let folks do the research on their own. I don't want to cast aspersions, but I think the other thing too, we were talking about this earlier today. It came up on a Clio webinar, and I think it's really interesting. There is a huge lack of trust uh, by consumers of AI in general, like as a thing. And, so I think some of it's because of the hallucination stuff and these stories. And, in the legal space, you see these stories of lawyers who are like using Chat GPT for case research, and it's coming up with fake cases and stuff. But there's a huge skepticism and cynicism. Now, ironically, Google's been using AI to serve results for some time, but from to your point about like, is there going to be a major consumer shift to Chat GPT? I don't know. Most of the survey data, the legal trends report data, they ask the clients that they surveyed, do you trust AI? And it was 50% said I don't trust AI. And then if you look at GeekWire there was a big study that came out. I can't remember. I'm blanking on the uh, company that did the study, but if you search
Clio?
for a GeekWire,
I
it
know.
wasn't Clio. This was outside of legal. This was just like a general consumer study. But anyway, the TLDR here is that trust in AI is very low, and I think for good reason. You just showed an example. Like it's not even close. Like it's not even showing you local results. And so anyway, I think it's exciting. There's no like it has, as you know, as I've seen you talking about it, there are a ton of applications for AI. So I'm not a like put your head in the sand and AI is not this transformative technology. It is. But it's not in the way I think a lot of people think, because right off the bat, everybody's, questions we get every day are, how do I scale content production with AI? And I'm like, if you copy and paste it into your, whether you copy and paste it into WordPress, your social posts or whatever, it's going to be riddled with errors. A lot of times we're going to be able to tell. And once you do that, this is my thing, goes back to the same thing with the consumer trust. Once you break the trust, once it looks like you're, inauthentic, whether it's on social media or your site or whatever it is, people aren't going to engage with you. They're not going to want to hire you. It just looks fake. It's like the spam blogs of yesteryear, and no one wants to hire a lawyer that's inauthentic like that, at least in my opinion. I shouldn't say that. There are some people that still probably hire a lawyer because they're not even doing the vetting. But for the most part, you want to talk about long term, you want to talk about brand building, you want to talk about authentic, like building your moat around your reputation. Like you got authenticity is king, in my opinion.
There are, as you mentioned, there are some certain tools outside of ChatGPT then that allow you to create very SEO friendly, close to getting authentic, real kind of content. Have you?
Totally.
Is there any particular one that you guys have been using, interested, or
We've
thinking
been
about
we've been
using?
using a lot of them. I'll even tell you, this is the other thing I always tell people, and in fact, you can do another test here. I'd be curious to see what happens. I haven't done it in a while, but when this stuff first came out, Google took a hard stance and said, "Hey, we're going to try to distinguish between AI generated content and human generated content." And I think that they quickly realized that it's pretty hard to tell. And so anyway, they came to this like they switched it to like, we don't care who creates the content, but if you search right now for Chat GPT for legal marketing. At one point, I had a post that was like ranking in the first spot, and I wrote right in the post, this was created by Chat GPT. And so the point is that that was just Chat GPT. That wasn't even anything fancy, and it was still ranking from an SEO perspective for the target query. And so, anyway, my point here is like there are lots of different tools. Some are better than others. Um, it still requires human editing. There was a tool. This isn't generative AI, but some of these tools. The other piece of this is, and this is where I think AI is actually really good, is that analysis and like identifying patterns in big data sets. But there's a tool called ClearScope. There's other tools that do similar thing, but they basically type a query in, it crawls Google results, the top 10 results, and looks for the patterns in the content to make suggestions for you. And then you can create your own content from those suggestions, headlines, keywords to include, yada, yada, yada. Those are really, really powerful. So for like, seed content, for, putting a layer over it that to have a different perspective, I think the AI tools are really, really powerful, but this isn't copy and paste time. This is, use it as an assistant. A lot of people talk about generative AI as kind of like a word calculator. If you think about it like that, the same way you would use a calculator, but like you're not just like blindly, you need to know the underlying formula to type into the calculator. Same thing, right? If you understand what the tool's doing and you use it to support you, super, super powerful. And I think, the kind of the meme that's going around is that lawyers plus AI beat lawyers or AI by each of themselves. And so I think that's true.
I did just clarify with ChatGPT where I'm based, and it gave me the top five what I thought was the highly rated car accident lawyers. And out of that five, I only know one of them. So who knows? Again, I wonder what the algorithm is that's trying to figure out based on what that is. And I
And
guess a lot of,
and type that in, as a follow up, type that in, right? How did you, where did you source these results? And it's interesting too, and I've seen it sometimes ChatGPT will actually source it depending on the prompt. Google, both Bard and Gemini, well, I guess those are one and the same now, and the SGE test stuff, they will also source stuff. And so that's what I'm always curious about because again, my SEO hat is, well, where is the machine pulling the data from? Because that's where I want to be, right?
exactly. And you just have to know where the game is to be able to play that game. And also, as we're talking about, realize that we're trying to figure out, but Google has a lot bigger reason to figure it out. They have $1.66 trillion reasons to kind of figure out how they should, deal with this. And as long as we're kind of doing what Google wants and doing what Facebook wants, then I'm sure the corporations will be able to figure it out for us.
Right. And and I think that's a really, really important point that I tell people all the time. You got to understand the platform's incentive, right? So, and we talk about this with Google Ads all the time, is, not only in the context of like SGE and stuff, but, Google has automated recommendations. They're coming up with automated content creation for ads, like AI driven content creation. Google has one incentive. They'll say, "Oh, we want to we want to organize the world's information and supply users with the answers to their questions." Google wants you to click ads. Let's just face it. That's where they make their money. LinkedIn, we talk about the LinkedIn algorithm. LinkedIn wants you to stay on LinkedIn. Facebook wants you to stay on Facebook. They don't want you to leave the platform. And so if you remember that as you're creating content, as you're running ads, remember the incentives of the platform. That should help inform your strategy, and give you just a short kind of silly example, but like LinkedIn, if you post native videos on LinkedIn and native images versus like a link to your own site, like we've been doing since, social media started, they'll give you a lot more reach than they will if you put a link in. And so, because they want you to stay on platform and, they want engagement. So we see the same thing in search, and AJ Cohn just had a great thing on his post is called Google Enough, but short version is that, yeah, guess what? Links in search results that get clicked, that get engaged with at a higher rate than other ones tend to do better because that's a signal Google's using to think about whether or not the users are happy. And so keeping people on platform, selling ads, those should all be part of like in the back of your head as you're doing stuff online.
How do you stay on top of all the trends and news and updates that's going on with marketing and Google?
Man, I don't know if I do. I try. It's hard. I'm very much like go to the horse's mouth. So, I've got a feed reader set up for all of like the major platform blogs and that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing that I think too, and even I always say, people are always like, why do you say that? But because again, in against my own interest. But don't take my word for it. Don't take Google's word for it. Go test and experiment with your own stuff. And people, I can't express that how important that is because what works for someone might not work for you for a variety of reasons. What one expert like me would sit here and, quote unquote expert might say might not work for you for a bunch of different reasons. And so test your own data, constantly be experimenting. But again, keep in the back of your head, what's the platform's incentive? Why are they making these decisions to to surface certain content? I think if you do that, you're 80% of the way there.
Do you follow any YouTube channels?
I've been slow on YouTube. I've been much more of a. I'll tell you recently. It's funny too because I was kind of slow on TikTok. But the thing about all this stuff online is like it's very hard to vet. And so I tend to just like, I'll see something come into my feed and I'll go maybe and I'll try and experiment something in like a test case, but I'm not a like a huge information consumer in that way. I mean, there's a couple authors, like I follow AJ Cohn's a big author. I follow some of the HubSpot stuff. There are a couple other SEO, like Ross Hudgens at Siege Media is somebody I follow for content. Um, uh, there are some industry folks that I tend to follow, but honestly, I know people aren't going to like to hear this. I know people are not very happy with Elon Musk, but most of my social media usage has really been Twitter. That's probably my most heavy usage. Recently, I've been on LinkedIn because I think it does have the professional intent, and we've had a lot of success. Because again, my audience is lawyers, and there tend to be a lot more lawyers there than on other social platforms. But I would encourage people to use YouTube. Again, I think as we go into this SGE world, it's likely that, I always remind people Google owns YouTube. YouTube's the second largest search engine to Google. And I think we're going to see a lot more YouTube video content surface in search results. And so, I'd be all over YouTube and all over TikTok. And I know there are issues with TikTok too, but it's madness when like, again, I was slow to adopt. I'll post a video on TikTok, same video, same tagging on Instagram, same on LinkedIn, same on, another platform. TikTok will take off out of nowhere. Now, again, all those real people? I have no idea. But in terms of views and impressions and reach and comments, TikTok, you know, it's craziness. It's to be the same thing. So if you run tests on different platforms, I think you'll see, and again, at the end of the day, too, the other thing I tell people is people are like, well, like I don't care about reach, I don't care about follower counts, I really don't care about that stuff. Show me the business metrics behind it. Like what is the value here? Is this actually turning into whatever your business model is? If you're a lawyer and you're generating fees, are people saying like, hey, I watch you on TikTok? Great. That's a qualitative data point for attribution for TikTok. But if they're not, if it's all like, anyway, this is a whole great conversation too on attribution because the thing that lawyers forget and marketing people like me have trained them is that, everybody's on last touch direct response. And so they're all like looking at their analytics and like, hey, can I see, click, call, hire? And then, my Google ads has got a return on investment, but people don't necessarily hire you that way, right? It's a referral. If someone saw you on the one thing, then they saw you on another thing. They finally actually, and so all of this quote unquote dark social stuff does make a big difference. And that's another person too. I would say Refine Labs and Chris Walker. His stuff's really really good if you're into that kind of like understanding attribution and dark social. So sorry that was kind of ranty, but
And that was
that's what I
great.
tend to do.
Guy, you only have 2 hours a week to dedicate to creating content. How do you distribute that time when it comes to short form versus long form? And this is now as a recording when we're recording this.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm just going to speak from my own experience. So don't take this as like, everybody should do this, but I've really been like, do a recording, do interview style recording of video and then batch it, right? So you can be like, you can get 1 to 2, you can get like, 32-minute clips from an hour recording. And then I'm trying to, most of my time is spent on LinkedIn and TikTok probably. I mean, I put it everywhere. Another thing too, that's kind of, that I do that a lot of people say not to do, because everybody's looking for shortcuts and automations and stuff, but I'm very focused on the engagement. So I post native in the platforms, like all of the tools I've ever used, Buffer, Hootsuite. There's another one called Post Hero. That Post Hero is actually nice because it's like $400 lifetime, and it will post everything. The problem is these aggregate post things, they screw up the tagging, they screw up the hashtags, and I'm much more concerned with the engagement than I am with anything else. And so most of my time on content is really more about the engagement stuff than it is even me like producing. And so it's really, really, the other issue is too, is like figuring out when the people you want to connect with are actually on the platforms, because you'll see if you post something and then someone comments and you're not quick to engage with it, it doesn't get the same kind of traction as it does if you're actually there to have the conversation. So I don't know if I answered you directly. I got 2 hours, so I do an hour of recording, and then I would say an hour of maybe engagement and that kind of stuff.
Nice. And a lot of people always just do one of those, and I think that's enough. But as you say, you need to have both the engagement as well, which a lot of people miss. What marketing channel would you invest the most money on right now?
Again, speaking for myself, and I'm counting time as money. Um, I'm in on LinkedIn. I think that I think I've always thought so. LinkedIn took a while to catch on. Um, but the thing that LinkedIn has is especially if you're like, I'm a B2B person because we sell to lawyers. So if you're a lawyer and you're a B2B lawyer, so you work with companies are your clients or general counsels your clients or other lawyers are your clients or whatever. LinkedIn has the business intent. People are there to professionally network. Now, again, you can get reach, TikTok for reach, but in terms of like actual engagement with business intent that people expect to get business content and have conversations like that, it's tough to beat LinkedIn in my experience.
Nice. What about Reddit? You might be one of the few lawyers that I know on Reddit. How's that going? How long has it
Reddit,
been? And what do you get out of it?
Reddit's great, and I will tell you because of this that article I mentioned before, Google enough. Google is surfacing forum and discussion content at a really, really high rate right now. And so Reddit and Quora, and I would say vertical specific publishing sites. So like, I don't even know if you can, I don't even know what the current status of this, to be honest with you, but Avo, you used to be able to publish on Avo, used to be able to publish on lawyers.com. Those forum sites are really enjoying a lot of search visibility. So I think that those are fantastic places to be. And trying to understand which subreddits and which threads are appearing. It's kind of the same thing we talked about in the old days. Is go look for your target query universe. Like if you frequently asked questions that people that are looking for you might ask, see what sites are surfacing and go spend some time there. And this is the problem, right? And in fact, someone was just saying this to me the other day because I was posting this on LinkedIn. It's like, oh, great, just one more thing for me to post on. And so, I say all these things based on like, hey, there's like, there's visibility here and all this good stuff, but resource deployment and trying to prioritize your resources, that's why it's like you got to take inventory of like how much time and money you're going to spend on this stuff first, and that should inform where you go. Because if you've got limited time and limited money, I'd rather concentrate than try to like be everywhere all the time. Like it's a different style of growth and marketing and different phase, depending on where you are in your kind of growth journey, I guess.
Is there any practice type that you're like a specialist at or that you focus on?
I would say most of our clients are, well, direct to consumer, but most of them are plaintiff PI lawyers. But we do have bankruptcy, immigration, criminal defense. Again, we really cut our teeth on search, and so uh, places that practice areas where people are likely to search for, whether it's research for a life legal issue that they're facing, or just a lawyer lookup. Those are the ones that we tend to work with the most.
So I made a post earlier today about what type of topics you like to ask Guy so we can answer. So the specific
Okay.
question that I posted was if you only have $10,000 to spend on marketing and you need to generate 10 clients in the next 30 days, which marketing channel would you invest in and what would be your strategy? So obviously it's practice specific. So yeah, with that little, cadence, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, and I'm super annoying, so I'm going to say it depends. But give me again practice area, location. So 30 days, 10 grand. What's the practice area?
I mean, yeah, PI is a little bit out there, so let's not do the PI. Let's just do immigration. It's a very
Okay.
common one.
Yeah. So here's this is the other thing that I always try to contextualize is like, is this your last 10 grand? Because, it people will like I would almost in some circumstances, I would forget about digital, go take some other immigration lawyers out to dinner and like start to get some referral stuff because in 30 days, it's gonna be pretty tough. If you're in an environment where you can profitably acquire a client through Google Ads. Again, a lot of ifs there and a lot of it depends. But the thing that Google has that nobody else has is search intent. And so if you're on queries and they're not costing you more than it's worth to pay for the click, and you can convert them within a target cost per acquisition, search is the shortest. It's the shortest distance, because everything else, brand, it's going to take long. Organic content could take long. You know, you can try to throw some. The organic stuff doesn't cost you anything except time. That's the other thing I always talk about is like, does that 10 grand? Are we assigning a value to my time on it? Because or are we just talking about media buy? So anyway, lots of depends in there. I will say this: I still think if if you're not in a competitive area, and you're in immigration, and you can find some kind of message and offering that's resonating, search has intent. Everything else is still interruption based.
If I had to answer this question, Guy, my answer would be different. And
Yeah, please.
I'm 99% certain I could do it for at least 80% of the practice types with Facebook and Instagram ads.
And would you be, it would be direct response? You're saying 30 days you'll be signed up.
Correct. Yeah. Direct response. And also, in order for that to happen, you need to have a really good conversion intake team who is a killer at signing up clients. But if you have that, then pretty much, I would pretty much almost guarantee it. Any practice type, with that budget within the next 30 days, completely possible. A very systematic approach, especially once I've done it so many times, I already know exactly how to study it.
That's another thing I think people should know. People like you that have the data on running it so many times, that's a huge competitive advantage, right? Because you've already done the learning. We see a lot of lawyers will say things like, well, I'm going to run my own stuff. And I'm like, it's an uphill battle because you're starting with no learning at all, where, other folks have been doing this a long time. They've already, waded through all the things that don't work. So, that's awesome. I think that's a great example.
And that's a great point. A lot of lawyers, you're like, this channel didn't work for me. And it's like, who did it for you? Oh, I did it. And it's like almost like a bit of certainty, unless like there's some people who are just like exceptional, they're outliers, sure. But for the most part, 80-90% of it, if you're just going in and you're competing with these guys who dedicate their entire life to understanding how Google Ads work, creating different ad groups and high quality scores and optimized landing pages and everything on the back end. It's a very tough game to beat. And the interesting part is, at least not on Google side, at least on Facebook side, Facebook kind of gives you a leg up early on. It's the opposite of Google in a little bit, right? Google, you kind of have to, get those quality scores and, build up that, I guess, trust with Google for Google to start, increasing your impression share and, showing you to more and more people. Facebook, it feels like it's the opposite way. They'll show your ads to the best people who are looking to convert. Your numbers are going to look amazing. But once you scale either past a certain geographic location or past a certain budget, then you kind of go into the real world. And that's where a lot of people kind of struggle beyond the 30 days, kind of scaling beyond the 30 days. So I guess the short answer is you got to just it's going to be either Google or Facebook, and you just have to know what you're doing. And don't try to figure out yourself.
Definitely ads. Yeah. Definitely ads of some kind.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing too. Everybody's like you were saying, like everybody's like, Google ads doesn't work, and I tried social ads and they don't work. And it's like, do you think that all these people are just continuing to spend money if it's not working? And so anyway, I think it's a really, really important point to realize. But because right now I feel like we're in this world of like, and again, no offense to anybody everybody does it their own way, but there's a lot of like brand and coaching and it takes time to build brand. Brand doesn't happen overnight. At least, I mean, again, you tell me I'm wrong, but for someone to be like looking for you to circumvent the whole system, like your name is in their head, that takes some time in most instances. And so anyway, I think it's a really good point.
So somebody added to that question about this $10,000 to spend. It's like I would ask about those firms that are scaling and have a higher budget. So how would this answer change if somebody's already at 30 clients a month and is looking to scale to like 60 clients a month? Obviously with a lot of nuances, but what are those things that you're kind of looking for?
Yeah, I'm always trying to test into new channels. And the other thing too that I think is important for people to realize is that um, the incremental cost of acquiring a client as you scale. I mean, again, lots of asterisks here. But for a lot of practice areas and a lot of geographies, it tends to get incrementally more expensive as you scale. This is why when you see like the Morgan and Morgans of the world, they're spending, they want to be everywhere all the time because they're purely like they don't even want you to go to Facebook to look for them. They're like, oh yeah, when I'm in a car accident, I'm thinking Morgan and Morgan. And so that incremental growth. Now again, you're talking about like net, they claim they're the biggest law firm in the country. So when you're talking about that kind of size to continue to feed the machine, like the incremental cost to acquire clients tends to go up. But when you're kind of in that middle area, it's testing new things. But I think the big thing for me too is that we've seen so much value in how these channels work together because again, while some people do click call hire or click fill out a form hire, a lot of people don't. They're shopping. And so that multi-channel where it's like, you show them an ad, they click, you retarget them, they see you again on their local newspaper, they see you again in their email, they see you again on another platform. That stuff works really, really well. And so I think as you start to grow, like that's the thing to figure out is like this integrated approach.
That kind of for me, when you're saying these things, I'm thinking in my head, just it's funnel. And I feel like that might be one of the biggest misconceptions in marketing is that word sales funnel. What does it mean? What is it? How does it work? How would you describe a funnel and how does that play into the whole system of generating clients for you?
Well, I'm talking to the expert on funnels here, so I'm not going to do good of a job as describing it, but I think of it more as like the this consumer journey. And so it's really about trying to understand how people are first looking for whether it's if you're talking about like quote unquote top of funnel, so they're doing research and it's understanding what their need state are at these various stages of the quote unquote funnel. And so and you have to have content and ad creative and tactics for each of these stages and start to understand where the consumer is in that buying, I think about it in terms of buying journey. Um, but so many people, and in my experience, they're either at the top, they're focused on the top of the funnel or they're focused at the bottom of the funnel. But all of that in between, that's the part that they forget about and nurturing people through that process. Like that's the part that seems to be missing most of the time.
You hit on the head, and this is like advanced marketing at this point. Once you get through the middle stuff, a lot of people when they run ads, they do marketing, they're speaking in a different language than where their potential clients are. And I just saw this just a couple of days ago. It was one of my friends who I guess hired a marketing company, and their marketing company was just shooting these bottom of the funnel ads, showing reviews and testimonials. And I sent a screenshot to him like, "Hey, sorry to break the news to you. I don't think these ads are not going to work. Your marketing guy just doesn't get it." And it's like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like trying to explain to him, the different way to talk to people who don't know you versus when they know you. And then now when they know you, you need to start speaking to them differently. And then now when they're decision stage, you need to speak to them differently. And a lot of people kind of miss these little nuances. Um, and Guy, I'm sure you can attest, maybe 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, even a couple of years ago, this could have worked. And it was kind of like, things were easier back then. With Google, you just have to put up any ads. As long as you put up any ad, then it was good enough. As long as we were there, it was good enough. Then as long as you had some ad groups and ad sets and stuff set up, then you'd be good. But these days, things have got so competitive and saturated that you really need to be nearly almost perfect with your messaging, with your strategy, with your structure, um, and everything kind of fine tuned for it to be working sustainably. Yes, again, you could get lucky and do well short term, but in order for continue doing well by month 3, 4, 5, 6, you have to continue doing well. Any thoughts about that?
Well, you said another thing that I think is so overlooked, but the messaging and the creative matters so much more than people give it credit for. People tend to think like, oh, I've got to, get my targeting settings right. But the creative makes all the difference. And, and this is true. We found this to be true cross channel. But if you spend more time understanding like the why people should hire you answers, and then work that into your creative, and then of course the other big piece that we talked about this earlier, but like test it, right? It's like just because you think this, or you know maybe you did some basic research, or maybe you did some competitive research, is that ad actually working? Another person that's been on my radar recently, I don't know if you're following him closely or not, but Alex Hormozy, he talks about 20,000. He's like, I wouldn't even go into market without 20,000 ad variations. Now, again, I say that and people are like, oh, we can't do 20,000. Oh, there it is. Great stuff, by the way. I encourage people, even if you're not, I know some people, they don't like the gym type of thing, but he does a great job of making the information very accessible. I really like all of his stuff. And anyway, kind of going sideways here, the creative and the testing is so important. You're at a huge disadvantage if you got one ad creative and you're never testing it, and then you're going to conclude the stuff doesn't work, and then you're like, I don't understand. And we see that happen all the time.
It doesn't make sense to pay a marketing company to do Google LSA.
It's funny. We actually we're in process of trying to offer LSAs for free. So, you know, and I always say this to people because people, I'm in these groups, I see all these lawyers asking these questions, and it's like, how much should a website cost? And how much should SEO cost? And how much should all this stuff cost? And I'm like, it's all over the map. So like, here's a question for you. You can go figure out how to go set up LSAs on your own. Now, what's the value of your time to go do that? I don't know. What's the value? You can go run your own Google Ads accounts. You got to go learn how to do it. I don't know what the time, if it's worth it for you to go learn that versus hiring somebody, what the value is for you. And so I'm always reluctant to say like yes or no to those types of questions because I don't know anything about you. I don't know what the value of your time is. I will say this, like LSAs happens to be one of these things. If you sit down for a weekend, you got to get your documents together. I think you probably can handle it yourself a lot of times. But I say that, and then I got lawyers that email me being like, I can't figure out how to get into my Gmail. And so I'm like, I don't want to just paint these. I think that's another thing that people like me do too much. We paint these broad brushes about people. Like the value's in the eye of the beholder. So, maybe it is worth it for you to pay for LSAs. I don't know.
I think my nuance is kind of depends on your budget, right? So if you only have $2,000, well, it's probably better to just put that $2,000, give it to Google. And that's the whole point of Google LSA. And I called it, I could confidently say this, I was literally one of the, if not the first person to call out Google LSA for lawyers, because I saw it for some kind of like plumbers or some kind of professional service. It was like a year and a half before Google LSA for lawyers came out. So I went on a search to see if there's such a thing for lawyers. There wasn't. There was only one company at the time, one SEO company. Forgot the name. Got in contact with them. I'm like, hey, is this available for lawyers? They're like, it's not. I'm like, can you let me know as soon as there is something available? So they let me know early. They were a Google partner, so Google let them into the beta program. They released it to me. I went and made a Facebook Live. It's like, guys, there's this new thing coming out, and you have no idea how crazy this is because that's where Google's heading. And why do I see that's where Google's heading is because Google is trying to bypass marketing companies, right? Instead of depending on marketing company to come and put up the ads for you, well, Google just wants to eat up the entire piece of the pie and say, just give it to us. We'll take care of it for you. You don't need a landing page. You don't need tracking. All you need is just give us your phone number and tell it where you want the calls to be made, and that's it. I'm like, this is the future. And I believe like 25 lawyers signed up. Those lawyers, I think like 20 of them were super uber successful, made a couple of $1 million off those. And then there was a couple others that trickled in. But I've still been hearing amazing good things. It really depends on the practice types, and I've kind of saved. I've been talking to a bunch of different media buyers who do a lot of Google LSA. I get a lot of data from them because I'm in a very interesting point where I don't do marketing for any lawyers, so I don't have anything to promote myself. But one is I'm a potential client myself, and two, I'm a great referral source for a lot of these media buyers. So in exchange of that, I will say, you got to give me data. Tell me what practice type is working. What's the cost per lead? If you have if you have data about cost acquisition, give it that to me too. Based on that, I see what makes sense. If it makes sense, I go pass it off to our members. Hey, if you're estate planning, you do immigration, you do criminal, you need to go to Google essay, because the person who's doing it says basically he has a 100% success rate. So go do it. So yeah, but again, coming back to the nuance, it depends on the budget. And as you said, you made a great point, Guy. Depends on you as the person. You know, if it's beyond you, by all means, instead of it's better to do it, pay a little bit more than not do it. And then the other thing is opportunity cost, kind of like your time. So, you know, a lot of these, if you just calculate the opportunity cost, if I get a company who can come and manage it, get it off my hands, and maybe go request those refunds for those spam calls or whatever, how much would that be worth? Does that make sense for the management fee? And if so, calculate that way, then great, let's do it. If not, no worries, just try to do it yourself.
That's the whole thing. It's you got to just look at all this stuff through business metrics, right? It's got to be analyzed through value of clients, target cost per acquisition cost. There's two other points that you alluded to there that I think are so important for people. One is like in LSAs, and this is true for local pack too. If you don't have you don't have a competitive number of reviews in your area, like forget about it. And so the more broad point is you have to understand what your firm looks like in the context of the competitive environment to the consumer. So, you know, people like me will come around and be like, "Oh, you need local SEO." And it's like, "Okay, that's great, but if you have no reviews," and the other one that you mentioned too that's so important is you don't have your intake locked down, forget about local SEO, forget about LSAs, forget about advertising. You're going to spend time and money driving visibility for your practice that no one's going to call you because all of the competitors you're showing up against have more reviews. You know, they're open 24/7, you're closed. And so anyway, I think that's the thing I always remind people is to look at your business through the eyes of your consumers, because that should dictate, you know, that and your financials should be dictating your strategy, not like, you know, people like Guy come around and say, hey, you should be doing local SEO. And so everybody do local SEO. And it's like, well, Guy's telling you to do local SEO because he sells local SEO.
Do you guys make landing pages? And then what's your system for creating good optimized landing pages?
Yeah, we've used a bunch of different platforms. We've had success with Lightboard. I think I think they're currently building on Instapage, but they're constantly testing and changing the different platforms. Um, but you know, the thing that for me on landing pages is, you know, it goes back to that same thing that people don't like. It matters like there are landing page best practices, and there's things you can test that you'll know like this will work better than this, like, you know, most of the time for this particular situation. But the messaging for the firm, like that's the thing that's so important. And so, you know, you see some of these guys are like you can do great and not even have best practice landing pages. Like I'll tell you, right, you probably see this all the time too, but there are some big media, some big lead gen buyers in legal that are buying Facebook media, and their landing page, you look at it and you're just like, there's no way this is working, and it's working. And so I think that's another point too, is that what you think might be working or not working, like, let the numbers tell you, let the conversions tell you, get the feedback from the users. Like that's don't make it like, oh, my landing page looks pretty and I spent, you know, all this money to make it look like the way I want it to look. Who cares?
If anything, I think when it comes to conversion, it's very counterintuitive. As you said, a lot of times we try to make it the nicest looking, and usually the nicest looking is not necessarily the highest converting. And then there's like a funny line that ugly converts, right? Have you
Yep.
heard?
Seth Godin has a great post on this. You know, pretty websites versus, you know, websites that convert, but it's true. I mean, we know it.
Nice. Let's go to rest of the questions that we had that were crowdsourced. Tom asked, "How can I rank in Google's search generative experience?"
Yeah, so I would say number one, I think it's important for people to realize like SG is only an experimental phase through the end of the year. I think a lot of us believe that they're going to launch it into the wild starting in 24. And I would start with same thing I would talk about in SEO. Go try to understand what SGE, where they're sourcing their data to serve those results. But from my limited research on this so far, It's a lot of the directory sites. They're using the directory sites. Moz, you can check out, Moz had a big study on this, and they said like, I think it was like 60% or 40%, I might be inverting those, of the time it actually mimics what's in the current local pack. And so some of it's going to be the traditional local pack signals. Some of it's, I think, going to be the some of this underlying structured data that they're pulling from like the directories and stuff. And some of it I think too, because again, remember, if you think about what these LLMs are doing, they're just guessing based on the prompt or the query in this case, what they think is the most likely thing to come next. And so, brands tend to do pretty well here because there's a lot of people that are actually searching and clicking on brand queries. That's why a lot of these bigger legal brands also tend to do better when they come into a new market, because they already have people are searching on the brand and people are clicking on the brand because they've seen the offline media. Um, but so it's a hard question to answer because again, it depends on kind of where you are, what your practice area is, what's your visibility right now. But I would still continue to focus on get the word out, get the machines knowing about who you are. Are you listed on Wikipedia? Are you listed in these directories? Are you publishing on these sites? And then understand where they're sourcing that data. It's the best I can tell you.
I found, Guy, that people are like stingy with their posts, right? Like, should I post this? Should I not? I'm like, who cares? Post. What do you got to lose? And I feel like a lot of people don't because they're like looking to get at least a certain number of likes or comments and engagement. If they don't, then I guess they get butthurt about it, and then they're like, "Oh, people didn't like it."
All I would say is like, yeah, that's great. You just learned something, right? That whatever you posted, maybe try something different. But yeah, I'm with you. And people ask me like, what platforms do you post on? I'm like, look, again, resource dependent, but in a resource limitless world, post everywhere, right? I mean, what do you have to lose?
It's literally free. You got nothing to lose, nothing to gain. And there's also hidden engagement that there's a lot of people don't talk about. Just because it doesn't get likes and comments doesn't mean it's not watched and consumed and actually does gets what it's supposed to do. And it takes
Absolutely.
and it's not just like one content and you just create one content and all of a sudden people are going to come message you, hey, can you hire me? It's that consistent attitude over long term that leads to the result that you're seeking for. And that's the
Absolutely. I
game
mean,
we were playing, right, Guy? Just a super long term game, just zero feelings towards anything short term. But that kind of attitude really brings the results that we know and expect. And even if we don't expect, this is it.
yeah, no, again, I mean that's the funny thing I tell people too, because it's like people are like, oh, that's boring. There's no like magic or silver bullets here. And I'm like, it's the same things it's always been. It's your reputation, it's the relationships you've got, and it's your it's the know, like, and trust. And so all of the internet and social media has done is like it's given us this vehicle to set that stuff on fire. So, people like to your point, someone watches a video of you and they don't hear from them. It's not direct response. We get this happens to me all the time. People will be like, I've been listening to your podcast for a year and I've just had, I just now is the right time for me to reach out and talk to you. And so it's like that kind of stuff that like doesn't get tracked by your attribution software that people have stopped doing because everybody's so focused on direct response. And don't get me wrong, there's a segment of the audience that the direct response still works extremely well for. Um, but again, yeah, that it's you don't get so caught up in those quantitative attribution metrics. Like think bigger, think long term, think about what you're putting out into the world, and the world will give you back if they like what you're putting out.
Is it okay for a law firm to be completely have a digital marketing presence, or is there any need for any traditional? And if so, if you had $30,000 to spend, which traditional marketing channel would you invest in? Billboard, radio,
Yeah,
mailers, or newsletters?
yeah, I've seen it. That's the thing I always say to people is like something works for everybody and nothing works for everybody. I know lawyers that are they're old school. It's literally like they have no web presence. They're getting referrals. They got these relationships. I think you're making it harder for yourself not having a digital presence. I know firms that are just they're focused totally on radio. I know firms that they're even around me, like there's billboards everywhere. So like you can do it. There's a lot of different paths to success. To me, it's about resource deployment. It's about understanding like where you are today and like where you're trying to get to over a certain time period. That's how you should inform your buying strategy or like where you're spending your resource deployment. And so like again, I've seen it work a million different ways, and I've seen it fail a million different ways. I think the biggest consistent thing on the failure is I tried, like Pokemon Go is a great example. Like I tried something once and it didn't work, and so I'm gonna stop doing it. But it's like everybody's looking for these like short-term shiny bullet things, and like, so even if you find a trick, it's only going to work until everybody else figures out the same thing. Like this is not like, you're not the only one who's got the keys to how this stuff works. And so I don't know. I'm just much more like, figure it out, put some metrics in place, some business metrics in place to hold it accountable, and then measure how it's working. But don't be myopic. Ask people how they heard about you. Put qualitative, how'd you hear about us in forums and stuff like that. But I mean, the intake process makes the biggest difference, in my opinion. You can try a bunch of different things, but if you don't have intake lockdown, you're going to miss data, you're going to miss calls, you're not going to know how to sell. We see this all the time where it's like, hey, you got, 1,000 leads here. What happened with them? I got 1,000 leads. How is that? Oh, well, you didn't answer 50% of your calls, or, you answered it with a, press one for this and press two for this. And like, guess what? Like people don't have time. They're not, if you don't know how to actually like move them from, click all the way to client, like there's a lot of different steps there that you got to make sure. And I'd focus a lot more on, doing it in reverse order. Great client experience, fast response, work them through intake, and then you can go and start trying to add more fuel to the fire.
Nice. Somebody says I can't afford marketing. What do you tell them, Guy?
Maybe can you afford not to do marketing? I mean, that's the other thing too. I always talk about when people ask that question is like, are you talking about money? Because if usually, and I shouldn't even say this, not usually, but a lot of times people are like, I don't have a marketing budget. Okay, do you have time? Because those are the resources you've got. You're either going to spend money on it or you're going to spend time on it. If you don't do either of those things, and this is, then again, there are firms I know that do this. They're just at the stage where they're at. They're like, I'm just going to do great work for clients, and I'm going to hope that those clients refer people to me in the future. And there are firms that do that, and they have successful firms on that. My personal view, you're making it a lot harder on yourself than if you carved out, whether it's time and or money, to actually invest in growth. And then there are firms that are like, I don't want to grow, but I just keep thinking this to myself, and this is more like a business thing. I know there are plenty of lawyers that are gonna be like, oh, that's not how it works in legal, and I'm like, all right, whatever. But businesses that don't invest in their growth eventually shrink and are likely to be dead over a long enough time period. I can't. There's too many businesses, even ones that deliver great services and products. If you're not investing in your growth in some way, you're going to shrink. I mean, that's what happens.
One of my kind of responses is like, what got you here is exactly that. So, if you're expecting different results, then you're just kind of like leading yourself down the same route. So even if that requires for you to go take out a $10,000 business loan to start investing it, then that might be the way to go. I'd rather do that than just sit on my hands and just pray for the best, because unless if you're going to go grind it out with time, the other resource, which a lot of people are not willing to do, Guy. Unfortunately, if you're not the type to invest money, you're also not the type to invest time. So it's one of those, what do you want? Then you can't really expect miracles. Guy, what's the biggest mistake in taking? And I know I'm giving you very hard questions, but I feel like they're like very poignant.
Yeah,
So we could
biggest
discuss.
mistake on intake. I mean, one is just, I would say, just total lack of intake. I mean, there are still firms that I'll talk to firms and I'll be like, well, how are you handling intake? And they'll be like, well, someone will leave me a voice message if they want to get a hold of me. And I'm like, you're buying media and not answering the phone at all. And we laugh about that, but I still hear that a lot. Or it's a solo and they're like, I answer the phone, I answer all the inbound calls. I'm like, well, then you're not answering all the inbound calls. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we put call tracking in where they're like, I answer all the calls. And then we put call tracking in and they're like, oh yeah, wait, I'm answering like 50% of the calls. I'm missing all these calls. And that's the part that no one sees, because no one's telling you you're missing calls. They're just evaporating. They're not coming back and being like, hey, I left you a voice message. They're just going away. And if you're not tracking that, those are the big ones that I see. But gosh, we could spend so much. I mean, the other one too is just like, some people like when they're the way that they're answering the phone is so bad, it'll be like law firm, like that's what you got to that's how you're doing intake. And then we've even had it where like you're listening, because some of these you can actually listen to the call recordings. Person's in they found the right lawyer, it's in the right practice area, the right geography, and then whether they, because they outsourced it to a virtual receptionist or they didn't train their intake person, the intake person will be like, we don't do that. And the lawyer's like, what are you talking about? That's exactly what we do. So we see a lot of that too. But gosh, the list of fails on intake is long.
I think you mentioned it. I think it's very obvious for me that the number one biggest mistake in intaking is doing it yourself. By far the most common. By far. And as you said, there's no way for you to know until someone comes and evaluates it for you. And usually the next step after that is there's a blaming game. And the blaming game always goes to the marketing company. Oh, they're
Bad leads.
doing bad leads. No, not enough leads, bad leads, all that stuff. So yeah,
Yeah,
usually
we know.
right. It's always the conversions. Like I would say, the name of the game is conversion more than generating. Generating is
Absolutely.
relatively easy, but if you again if you partner with the right people, the right companies, it should be pretty easy to generate leads. This side, on the other hand, we got a lot of a lot of stuff to improve on.
And the incremental value on improving the conversion is so much more valuable than the incremental increase in leads. You know, you can, if you take your conversion rate from 5% to 10%, and you do the same thing, 5% to 10% leads, you will see more value for your firm with the 5 or 10% on conversion than you will on the 5 or 10% increase on leads every single time.
Did you pay for links?
That's a very more nuanced question than I think a lot of people think it is. So I'll give you I'll throw the question back. Does, if I sponsor my local high school's, football team, and they put a link on the website, did I pay for a link?
Technically, yes, but that's a good, yeah.
Now, do I go out and like, when I get these 10,000 emails from like, get a DA 75 domain authority 75 guest post link, do I do that? No, I do not. So, you know, that's what's hard. So like, and we'll be like, Google's guideline is don't buy links. I will tell you that there are a lot of people that are buying links that it's working, and it works until they catch you. There are manual actions, and there's a whole bunch of gray area in between on like what's a bought link, in my opinion. If I'm trying to think of another example, but like there are all sorts of like kind of in between of like the real like private blog network and that sponsorship example, a scholarship idea. I see a lot of lawyers that will like, they'll do a local scholarship and they'll go and distribute it, and people will be like, oh yeah, I want to get the word out about this scholarship. Are those links paid for? I mean, you're not paying that person directly. Anyway, it's nuanced in my opinion.
Nice. So David asked, kind of along with this, the same question is: we know you love links, Guy, as they
Yeah, I do.
work. So how do you get them? But jokes aside, how did you achieve the top listing above places that you shared a few screenshots about a few days ago, or was it a paid ad? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was
Yeah.
Yeah, that was organic. I mean, so sometimes, and I apologize. I gotta go pick up my daughter here in a second. But sometimes Google will test traditional organic results above the local pack. There's no rhyme or reason. The general mantra is the more authority that you get, the more the metric I use for uh, links is locally relevant for local, topically relevant, ideally, and then the number of local linking root domains. So, and I tell people this all the time, but like, let me give you a couple of examples. Ideal world, there's a business in your local area that serves clients in a similar way. Maybe it's not a law firm, but maybe you're a personal injury lawyer and there's a physical therapy or a rehab facility that's in your local area. if you can find a way to get a link on their website, whether it's you contribute content to them, whether you sponsor, whether you do a speaking engagement and they give you a link, those links tend to move the dial more, in my experience, more than anything else. If you can't get you can't do the physical therapy with the personal injury one, then I'd start focusing on just the locally relevant. So like even a pizza shop down the street, you do some like co-marketing thing with them. They put a link on their site. And sometimes it doesn't even be a link, just a citation, right? They just list you like, hey, this is one of our, friends of the pizza shop. That kind of stuff moves the dial in local SEO, in my experience.
Nice. And last question, Guy. What is your number one tool right now? Number one favorite tool?
Well, I don't remember I think it's Andrew Shotland who says I'm going to steal. Critical thinking is the number one tool. But if you want to say like an SEO tool that I really like, we use all the biggies. We use SEMrush, we use Ahrefs, we use Moz, Local Falcon, Places Scout. I'm naming a bunch of them, but
So
I'm big on.
If you had to pick one out of all of those, which one would you pick?
I'd still pick Search Console. I'd pick Search Console. If it's an SEO tool, I'd pick Search Console.
Wow, that is nice. Was not expecting.
It's free. It's free.
It's free and it comes from Google itself. So it
comes from Google and it's SEO, and they tell you, they're telling you what the impressions are. So
that's where I maxed out on my SEO. I taught myself SEO a long time ago, and then I was basically 80-20ing my top ranked pages, and then I think that was the last thing I ever did, and then I kind of had to delegate it off. Guy, thank you so much. It's been amazing. A lot of golden nuggets. I started saving all the topics and I actually posted the comments in there. If you go look at the comments on all the things we talked about, a lot of really golden nuggets in there for us. Appreciate you, Guy. Guy, if people want to talk to you, where are you? Where do you do your shows, and how could people find you and hire you for all the things that you do?
Check out the thing I'll pitch is Lunch Hour Legal Marketing Podcast. Follow, subscribe to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. We have a lot of fun over there. Sam, thank you so much. I've really, really appreciated this, and keep up the great work. You're doing some really awesome stuff for lawyers. So
appreciate it.
Awesome to see.
Appreciate it, Guy. Thank you so much. All right, everybody.
Sam, take care.
See ya. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. Just a quick little recap. So quick recap. Today I had Guy on, who is a lawyer, but also he's a marketing and SEO expert for lawyers. We talked about the future of SEO for lawyers. We talked about AI tools that can be used for SEO. We talked about the best AI tools for creating content. What does Google and Facebook want? How to stay on top of marketing updates and news. How to create the best form of content, whether it be short form or versus long form content. On what marketing channel would you invest the most money on? We talked about LinkedIn, we talked about Reddit, we talked about Quora. Also, we talked about if you only have $10,000 to spend, how would you, if you only had $10,000 to spend on marketing and you need to generate 10 clients in the next 30 days, which channel would you invest in and what would be your strategy? We also talked about sales funnels for lawyers. What is the funnel? Do they still work? We asked a very hot question, which is, does it make sense to pay a marketing company to do Google SA? There's so many companies that right now that are charging crazy amounts to do that. I personally don't think you need to pay anybody to do Google SA for you, for the most part. Other topics we talked about is best way to create optimized landing pages. We talked about traditional marketing sources. We talked about the secrets behind hidden engagement. We talked about if somebody can't afford marketing, what to do about that. We also talked about what's the biggest mistake in intaking. We talked about paying for links. Does that ever make sense? And we also talked about Guy's number one favorite tool. So a lot of golden nuggets in there. Go watch it if you didn't. Yeah, if you enjoyed this video or got value from this video, please take a moment right now to give this video a like right now and just comment right below. And just tell me one good thing or something that you got out of this. And if you have any questions you want me to make other videos on in future videos, just let me know right below. All right. Have a great rest of your day.